Hello and welcome to this tutorial where I will show you from start to finish how to construct a welt pocket in the front of my Jurassic coat pattern. I hope this helps you along the way, and there is a separate video showing you how to sew the underarm gusset. I'll leave a link below and the tutorial will start now. I've got two pairs of linings and I've got my pocket facings. So what I'm going to do is sew my linings to the pocket facings at the same time so that I have a pair of pocket facings. Hopefully that will make sense. So with right sides together, I'll just align these notches and pin along the seam. Just put a few pins in, and then I'll do the same on this side, again with right sides together. And remove the other sides of the pocket bags so that when I've sewn these I'll have a symmetrical pair, so that I won't end up with two like pocket facings for like the left hand side or the right hand side. They're a proper pair. Right, so we'll just quickly sew these seams. Well, it doesn't have to be quickly, in your own time. So I'll slide that underneath, making sure that no fabric has got folded underneath at the beginning, because that can happen. And then we just back tack at the beginning, remove the pins as you go, and sew with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Okay, and then trim those ends as you go so you don't have a lot of trimming to do at the end. So I've gone ahead and sewn both of those, and whilst we're here I shall understitch at the same time. So understitching is just top stitching like one of the elements to the seam allowance, and in this case it's the lining, and we'll just top stitch it a couple of millimeters away from the original seam, just to keep it nice and flat. So there we go, and you can press this seam. I'm not going to, just because I'm just going to carry on going through the process, but that's your facings done. So we're going to pin the pocket facings to the coat front with right sides together. These are the alignment markers and they will align with the top of the pocket. So I've got the side seam on this edge, and over here is the centre front, and this is the top of the coat. This is the hem end of the coat. So it should be facing up like this, with the pocket bag sort of arching up, so that when it's folded back down it will sit comfortably to have your hand in it. Now what we want to do before pinning it in place is just draw a line between the markers here, because that will be our sewing line. Now this ruler isn't quite long enough, so what I'll do, because it's a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, I'll just put a central marker just to help me along the way, and then draw my stitch line. I don't know if you can see that. Oh, So there we go. It's just it's quite faint, but it's good enough for me to follow. And then I shall try and make this a bit more central. So I just want to align this dot here over this dot here. So find that marker, put a pin in place, and do the same over here. Then pop some pins along this where we'll be sewing. Maybe these are not the right size pins because they're a bit flimsy for this thick fabric, but it's fine, we'll go with it. Okay, so that's all pinned in place, so I just need to sew along there. I'm not going to show you how to sew both pockets. I'll just run through one from start to finish. So we won't do the left and the right side. We'll just concentrate on this left hand pocket for now. So I've got it under the machine, and where this marker is, I'm just going to get that under the foot, pop my needle down, and then do a back tack here, making sure to not go beyond that marker when you go backwards. So just take it slowly. Right, that's nice and secure, and then I'll follow this very faint line that I've got. This is a really light fabric, which I generally sew darker fabrics for coats because it's more practical, in which case chalk would work really well. It doesn't work on this fabric, so I've just got a fabric pen, but it's kind of running out, so that's why it's really faint, but it's good enough. By the way, apologies for any camera shake. I have actually got the tripod on a separate table, but it still is experiencing quite a bit of shaking. Let's see if I can help that. Right, and then I've got to my end marker, so I'll put the needle down again and sew backwards. There we go, just to finish it off and make it secure. So very accurate sewing at this point, because that's really, it's really all that you need for this type of pocket, is just to keep things accurate, which just requires you to work a bit more slowly, I think. Here we go. I actually forgot to run through this, but I've already interfaced the parts as per the instructions. So the what will be the back of the pocket opening has been interfaced, the facing, and also the pocket welts, which I've just got here. So they've all been done in advance, but I forgot to mention that. Right, we'll move on to the next bit. Straight into more sewing. This time I've got a pocket welt piece. Let me just move that machine back so you can see it fully. So it's just the rectangle fabric, and there's a halfway point which has got some notches. There are some marker points, which is what will align with that, but I haven't actually marked them on here. It's not vital that you mark those pieces. It's just really to give you an indication of where this is going to go. So what I need to do is grab my pins and just pin these short edges. On both sides, so you've got right sides together. I don't know how people make these tutorials look so easy. It certainly is like mind-boggling to me. Right, so I've got those sides pinned. Really not very central, am I? Right, so let's pop that underneath the machine. As with most seams, this requires a back tack just to get you going, and remove the pins as you go. And then trim the ends as you go. To the other side. And because my fabric is so thick, it does feed through the machine really well actually. But sometimes I just I don't really push it, but I just give it a little bit of a helping hand to get it through. Just to make it a bit smoother. Right, so we've got that sewn, and before we turn it back through, we just need to trim some of these side seams, especially on this fabric because it's quite a heavy weight. So what I do is I just grade the top seam allowance down, and then I lop off those corners, but not right up to the stitch line, still a fair bit away. Again, lop off the corners and grade that down. Okay, so it will just reduce some of the bulk when it's turned back through. So I'll do that, really push those corners out. Okay, and then I can just quickly press that, and I'll come back and we'll position it onto the coat front. So I'm back from the ironing board, and as you can see it's lying a lot flatter, but I haven't actually pressed it with the iron plate. I've just used the steam function on my iron just to relax those seams and also this top edge, because I'm just concerned that the iron plate might crush this lovely pile that's naturally on the fabric. I don't think it really requires being sort of pressed the life out of. It's 100% wool, so it's going to do what it wants to do. It really doesn't need you to flatten it out that much. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this as my facing edge, which has got the whole seam allowance on, I think. Actually, no, scrap that. I'm going to use this graded edge as my facing edge because that actually feels a bit nicer. So what I want to do is turn that over and have right sides together. Now, those markers that I didn't put on, they actually are going to tell you where this goes. So what I'm going to do is grab my pattern piece, which is here, and well, I already know, so the markers will be 1.5 centimeters away from the cut edge. So what I'm going to do is just use my pen. This actually is it disappears with water, so it's not a permanent mark, which so I'm confident that I've used it enough times before that it will disappear. So I'll just quickly mark that edge. And also over here, and I'll mark my seam, the stitch line that I'm going to do, and then draw a nice line across there. Now I think those pins that I was using before, they're not going to cut it, so let me go and grab some better pins. Right, I've got some more heavy duty pins here. By the way, I should actually mention the size needle I'm using. So I actually buy in bulk. I just get these off of eBay, but it's this like a pack of 100 needles or something, and it's this size, so 100, which I believe is similar to a size 16 needle. if on that other numbering system where you get like 10s, 12s, 14s, I think it's like a 16, so it's a nice heavy duty needle, and it's perfect for this fabric. Right, so let's pin this in place. Right, I might need to stand up for this. So we've got that aligned with that. Oh, blimey, this fabric is so thick. Now these are needles, pins, I mean, from when I used to be a curtain maker. They are really great for this kind of fabric. And they're glass headed, so they last a long time. Right, and then just sort of measure that gap, which is a centimetre, and just try and make sure it's an even distance from both edges, which I think that's good enough. Good enough is okay by me. Right, so I'm happy with that, so we will sew that in place. Right, back to my machine, and I believe my machine is going to be quite challenged by this. So what I might do is, rather than back tack it, I'm just going to walk it backwards by hand and then go from there. Yeah, nice. Definitely removing these pins as I go, because if these get caught in the machine, that would be a nightmare. Right, there we go, it's on at least. Now can we get it out? Trim your ends like a good sewer. Sorry camera, sorry viewer. Right, so let's move this sewing machine out of the way again. Let's see what we've got. Oh, can we see that? No, it's not in shot, is it? Right, so we've got our facing, we've now got our welt attached. Let's see if I can move this. Yeah, that's better. And now we need to get a lining on here. So let's grab my lining. And we want it to be mirroring what's happening above. So if I just twist this so it's more in shot. Oh my gosh, sorry. What a mess everywhere. Right, here we are. So I've got this one curving out this way, and then I'm going to find its mirror image here. So you've got one going that way, one curving this way, and then they will match up when this is pulled down like that. Okay, so these notches here, they'll align with the side of the welt, and we need to go back over this seam that we've just sewn. It's easier to do that on the wrong side of the fabric, but as you can see, with this thick fabric, it's going to be tricky. So I'm going to pin it here, baste it in place on the machine, and then flip it over and do a closer stitch. So just take my time and get it done right, rather than try and fudge it and you know, have the frustration of having to unpick it and do it again by trying to speed the process. So I'm not going to start where the notch is. I'm going to start about 1 centimetre in from there, and I'm going to change my stitch length so it's on the largest length, because this is purely just to keep this lining in place. So the seam allowance is 1.5 and I'm probably sewing half that. So it's basically just to tack it. Switch it on again. No need to back tack at this point. I'll just take it away from the machine. Right, and then I'll flip it round and then I'll do my proper seam this time, and hopefully everything will stay where it should be. Oh, this is nerve-wracking, isn't it? Doing it in front of you lot. Okay, so change my stitch length back to where I had it, which was still quite a big stitch length because this is quite a thick fabric, so still got it on 3. Right, slight back tack, and then again, don't go beyond the seam that you've actually used to attach the welt. You must stay within that seam because otherwise it will just show on the front of your coat. Okay, so just be mindful to have it accurately sewn, you know. You can keep it within, like, if it stops just before that seam, that doesn't matter, but it's just important to not go beyond it. Now, I want to show you something because whilst it's important to be as accurate as you possibly can, sometimes, you know, we're human, these are fabrics that move. Let me just, so it's not possible to always be as accurate as you like. I mean, there are different ways to counteract this by doing lots of hand basting and being a lot slower than what I'm being now. But I can see right now that's 4 centimeters, which is what it should be, and that's 4.75. So it has dipped in about, you know, 1/4 centimeter just here. Now I don't think that's going to matter on the final coat, so I'm not going to stress about that too much, but I just want to be honest that that happens to me. It might happen to you, depending on how you view those sorts of things. I don't think that will be that big a deal. I could unpick it and start again and that would be fine. Other occasions I might do that if I thought the fabric would be particularly affected, but with this wool, which I know is quite malleable, I think that 1/4 centimeter is fine. Right, so here we've got the right side then. So that's not caught any of the lining, which is a relief. Sometimes, you know, you turn it back through and there's a bit scrunched like on the corner and you're like, oh, I need to unpick that. So we've got to a good stage. We're getting there. Right. I guess the next thing we have to do then is to cut this baby open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my scissors. These are very sharp scissors. If you're thinking these look unusual, they're called applique scissors, I believe, or duck-billed scissors. I don't know if I've made that up. And they're very sharp and they're really good. This sort of acts as a safety barrier to cutting random bits of seam allowances that you don't want to cut. I really love these scissors. I find them very useful. Highly recommend. So I'll make a hole in the center of my coat. I use these for cutting buttonholes open quite regularly. well, as regularly as I make buttonholes, that is. Right, so I've stopped here, which is about, let's say, 2 centimetres away from my stitch line. And this is where I'll start to make sure I'm in the camera, because this is the whole point. Then I'll start to cut diagonally down to my stitch line. So this is the scary part of a welt pocket, because there's no going back once you've done this. I think there is still opportunity to correct any mistakes if you do make any, but it's still scary. Right, so that's one corner done. Two corners. Flip it round to do the other side. And, you know, do move things around so that you've got like a better side of approaching it. Don't just keep things on the table and then keep having to awkwardly move your hand to try and get into a correct angle. Just move the piece. Look, you can see I'm off point there. How did I manage that? Right, so there we go. So we've got our pocket hole now. Eek. And then we need to start putting everything in. Now, at this point, you could, if you wanted to, understitch this lining to the pocket welt, but I'm going to not do that. And I'm just going to flip my facing into the hole, like so. So this is getting more pocket-like as we speak, and then turn it over to the reverse side and start to reveal what the next step is, which is sewing down these side seams. So what you should have is, where you've cut diagonally, you should have a little corner of fabric here, triangle of fabric. So if I fold that back and lay that down, that is going to be our seam line. So where that's folded, what I'm actually going to do, I don't normally do this because I find it's such a short area, it's kind of easy to know where to sew, but I'm just going to mark that seam line. So from that corner to that corner, that's where I want to sew. And this bottom corner should line up with the lining which is attached to the facing part. Right, so confession, I just sewed this perfectly, but there's no bobbin in my machine, it ran out. So I've just sewn it again. So just make sure that is 1.5 centimeters away on this bottom edge. It will be at the top edge because that's where it's attached to the coat, but this bottom edge, you just need to make sure that that is the same distance. And let's get this thing sewn, but securely this time. So what I'm doing there is just a couple of back tacks. Let's take this pin out slowly as I go, so I don't want to lose that distance. Again, a couple of back tacks. Right, let's see how this looks. Okay, trimming the ends as we go. Right, so there's my seam, there's the back. Let's move this again so we can hold it out nicely for you. And this is it from the front side, okay? Oh, you've got to be joking. Okay, I'm just going to need to unpick that. Right, sorted. Just keeping it real for you, you know. Right, so that's all done now. So that looks nice and neat. So I'll just do this other side and then we'll be able to tuck this lining piece in and then have the welt coming up. So that's what it will look like. So let me get that other side done and we'll proceed. So our facing is complete, it's in. You'll notice I've cut mine with the direction of the stripe going across, so it's, what do you call that? So I've got this vertical stripe and it's going horizontal. That's what I've done. Is that right? Oh gosh, I don't know. Anyway, one of those things. Just because I didn't want to match up with this grain, and also, yeah, I didn't want little tiny lines like candy stripes going down either. So we are ready to turn this back through. So I push the bag in there, and as you can see, we've got a welt pocket here, which is looking pretty nice. So let's flip it back over to reveal our pocket bags. So this is the one that's attached to the welt. So flatten that out. This is the one that's attached to the facing. Sorry, let's try and zoom up a bit, or at least just lift the camera. And I'll just pin around this edge, and that's where we will sew. So let's do that together. See, now these pins are too chunky for this fabric. This is why you need lots of pins. Right, let's go to the sewing machine. Getting this fabric underneath this sewing machine where the welt is, it's pretty tricky. So I'm just going to, rather than start in line with the welt, I'm just going to start in at an angle and back tap. As long as the pocket bag is sewn together, it doesn't matter if all of the seams line up. I'll try and show you what I mean at the end. Oops. Okay, so what I meant by, oh, it's quite a big stitch, I could probably go over that a bit. What I mean by, I'm not lining this seam up with this welt seam, which is what I would normally try and achieve. I'm just kind of going off at an angle. And that's how I started it off as well, just kind of coming in at an angle. So it won't actually affect the pocket from the front, but it just means you can get your machine in and get as close as you possibly can. So that in effect is our completed welt pocket, well, sort of completed welt pocket. I'll just give this a quick show of the steam, and we'll sew down this welt. Right, so I've steamed the welt pocket and I've just hand stitched it down along these edges. So that is the pocket complete, but as just one final step, I'm just going to top stitch along these two edges just for some extra security. If you're confident in your hand stitching, then that would be fine, but I do like to just top stitch it with the machine just to make it extra secure. It would be much harder to do that after the coat was complete once if you decide you don't feel secure enough with the hand stitching. Right, so let's do that. So I've got about a foot's width from the edge of the welt, and I'm going to use a fairly reasonable, I'll use the biggest stitch length actually, make sure nothing's tucked under, just because different fabric weights actually require different settings. So a stitch size that you might think looks nice for top stitching on a finer fabric, on a thicker fabric it would just look pretty mean and sort of dense, because the thread has to go through more fabric, so it sort of just pulls it together more. So I like to use the biggest stitch length on thick fabrics like this. Again, switch it on. So I'll just do a couple of stitches, some back tacks. Make sure that pocket bag's out of the way. Ooh, let's have a look at that. Oh, needle's still intact. Oh my gosh, that was lucky. And that's what one side looks like. Phew, just made that, I think. Don't know how this needle's doing. Miraculously, this needle is stitching fine. I think it's just this area where it's so bulky. Right, let's not push our luck, that'll do. So there's the top stitched welt. The top stitching is completely optional. In some ways this might look better without it, it would look cleaner because it's a nice plain fabric, but for security, like just so it won't tear so easily over time, I prefer to have it stitched down. There is a way of sewing the welt so that it actually, you don't sew it. Let me just try and explain. So you could sew the welt rather than turning it right sides together like that and sewing these short seams. You could just attach it to the coat like this, like this, and then sew that into the side seams along with the facing. So actually these are tucked into that seam. That is possible. It can get a bit bulky doing it like that, so which is why I've chosen to sew these short seams and turn it out and hand stitch it down. So yeah, it's entirely up to you what you think your machine is capable of handling, what material you're using. But yeah, I think this is a really successful pocket. Let's just quickly flip it round. So we've got on the reverse side, there's our pocket facing, our little short seams, there's the pocket bag, and I'm happy with that.